So today I'm super excited to welcome Tim Schumacher, serial entrepreneur, to the show Making It Real. Tim, so great to have you online. Can you tell us a little bit how you got started in the entrepreneurship world?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Jan, for having me on your podcast. I think I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Like when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I was always fascinated by selling things and producing things and having my own shops and stuff. And then I really got into computers when I got my first computer with 13. I was like a real nerd, coding and programming my own things with my friends. I was super fascinated with that as a teenager. And then kind of my first entrepreneurial real project was with 17 when we developed a soccer manager. It's like a football manager for our local club. I'm from Freiburg, southern Germany. So we've got the SC Freiburg, and we developed a full-fledged soccer manager where you could kind of trade players and play games and stuff. And that was obviously long before sophisticated games like FIFA. So that was in 1994. And we sold that several thousands of them. That kind of became the starting point for everything else we did. Then I studied.
Maybe if we start right there, how did you do the distribution of it? So I can imagine you guys coding a game where you kind of do a game outlet, you try it out with friends, how it works and so. But then how do you get it out? Oftentimes, this product that you have.
That was before the internet. I mean, internet was invented, but it wasn't a thing. So it was on discs. It was one floppy disk. We teamed up with a local newspaper. The local newspaper, obviously at that time, being the main distribution channel for something like that, and with a club. So it was actually a good partnership. And then it was sold in the local shops, at the shops of the newspaper, through the newspaper, all of that. And they pretty much handled the distribution.
And a little bit like a revenue share or something where they get some.
They got the bulk of the revenue. I think that was one of the things where I learned if you own the distribution, you get 90% of the revenues, and essentially it was a little bit like when writing a book, the actual author gets like 10% or something. But it was a lot of money for us. Like we were 17, then just turned 18. It was still it was a great thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Fast forward, one of your major hits then was Sedo. Can you tell a little bit how you got started with Sedo?
Yeah, actually, the soccer manager led to Sedo ultimately. What happened is that so we started that game for our local club, and it worked really well. And then the other clubs got interested. So we developed the club then also for Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, Hamburg, a couple of other of the big cities. And sold it all over Europe, all over Germany, and that was also the time when the internet came up, and when we started to get into domains and looking at our own domains. And we always then had the problem that the best domains were taken, the domains we wanted for our distribution, and that's how we got into e-commerce, and how we ultimately said, hey, there needs to be a solution for buying and selling domains.
Which year was that in, more or less?
So that was about 2000. 2001 was when we started Sedo. That was right after the bust of the .com boom. It was not the best time to start an internet business. All the VCs said, like, just go home. This internet thing is not going to work. We luckily found a seed investment by United Internet. So 1&1, a big German internet conglomerate, and they did a seed investment into us, 400,000 euros for 40% of the company. It's kind of a deal I wouldn't do again today, but it was fair. Like we were 23, we didn't have much more than an idea, and it was a rough time, to be honest. And they brought a ton of strategic value. So overall, it was fine, but it was still something where today I would tell every entrepreneur, like, don't give out 40% of your company to the first investor. That's certainly a no-go.
What would you say, normally what's normal? Like how much, especially at this early stage, you said you didn't have much more than an idea, and we'll zoom into that in a bit as well. How much would you say people should kind of consider what's kind of normal in the industry, let's say?
First round, maybe like 10% or something. Can be a little bit more if there's a lot of money involved or big strategic value. But ideally, I mean, as the company grows bigger, also the valuation grows. So the dilution also will be reduced over time if you don't take all the money up front. But easier said than done. I mean, 2001, there was not much of a business angel community. VCs were, I mean, there were 2 or 3 VCs back investing in the dot-com boom, but they were essentially saying no to anything internet. So it was totally a different situation.
So today has gotten much easier now. There's a ton of business angel, lots of liquidity, people actually not needing to spend money almost and looking for investment deals. Entrepreneurship has become mainstream. If we look at the idea that you had back then, saying, okay, there's domains, many domains are taken, domains that we like. How did you develop that? How did you decide how could this business then actually work? Because there were these domain hosters out there, institution companies that issue domains as well. How did you develop this idea?
Well, we developed it by our own need. And I think that was one of the learnings I really took from my career is you always try to solve your own problem. Those are usually the best ideas which you kind of try to derive from the drawing board. They tended to not work for me. What always worked is if you solve your own need. And our own need was that we wanted to register domains which were taken, but there was no marketplace and it was not easy to buy them. It's a very fragmented market. Like there are domain hosters, there are then obviously thousands and tens of thousands of people who own domains, some people who professionally own domains, but there's no market. And ideally what we wanted, and what is still the goal of Sedo, is that it's as simple to buy a domain as it is to register an available domain. And the topic, even 20 years later, is still acute. Still, when we now start a business, is always one of the first things is my domain taken? What are alternative domains? And we've seen about 10 years ago, we've seen the new top level domains arrive, things like .shop, .web. We've also seen a lot of top level domains who used to be country code domains, so like .io, .tv. So TV, for example, is Tuvalu, is a small island in the middle of the ocean who got rich by selling the domain, probably the most famous one. And they're now used broadly. IO, for example, or AI is another one. I don't even know which country it belongs to, but AI is not AI. It's a small little country, and so but still the topic is very acute. The best presence, you want .com and you want the local TLDs, and so it's still kind of the backbone of the internet.
Mm-hmm. So you had this idea that it would be good to create a marketplace for those. And so how did you proceed then with that? Was it just like, hey, let's then just build one, do the UX for it, know a bit about the host to just build the product out? Or did you kind of try, like back in those days as well, writing business plan was kind of a thing to do? And so...
Yeah, we wrote a business plan. I was back then, I was at the Stockholm School of Economics, who had a really good entrepreneurial program long before anybody had that in Germany. So I'm very thankful for that. And so I did get some credit for the business plan. Today, indeed, I would not advise anyone to do a business plan. I would advise to do a proper spreadsheet and really think things through, but then do a pitch deck for the presentation. And then, yeah, we went about building the website, just very normal, like what you would do today. Of course, back then there weren't any templates or any tools. Everything had to be kind of programmed from scratch. And then the big question I think we asked ourselves, and that question is still very much acute to any marketplace business, and essentially Sedo is a marketplace, like many business models out there, is like, how do you get started? Like with a marketplace, you always have the chicken and egg problem. You've got supply and you've got demand. And if you have neither, it's really hard to get started. And then you have to decide, do you go for one niche? So for example, Facebook is a prime example for that. They started in Harvard and then they extended it to other universities, and then they open it up to students, and so they try to be a network in their own niche that can work. So you pick a city, or you pick one group of stakeholders, and then you really penetrate that group before you go broader. That is certainly one aspect. And then there is another marketplace approach, and that's one we took. Back then it was more kind of intuitive. It's if you have supply and demand, you basically you could summarize it under fake it till you make it approach. And it's an approach, for example, Google uses a lot. Whenever Google goes into a new vertical, they just scrape all the existing players out there. And so that's also what we did. Is there were actually a lot of marketplace and listings and sites out there. So we scraped them all. We didn't include them in the database, but we scraped kind of the superficial information. And that way we had, from day one, we had the biggest supply on the web. And then we, over time, converted those scraped information into actual customers. And that definitely gave us an edge over other competing platforms. And that is, for example, it's still a marketplace strategy, which I'm, to my surprise, too few founders actually employ, because it's very easy.
One question with scraping always is this kind of how legal it is, and so was it legal? Was it barely legal? Was it like a gray area kind of to do? And then
scraping is actually very legal. It's, I mean, the web is open. Sure, you're not allowed to scrape proprietary information, which is behind, for example, paywalls. But actually, just very recently, I looked at the legality of scraping, because we bought a scraping company, Scraper API. Scraper API.
Oh, sorry. Here you go. Sorry.
Yeah, scraperapi.com. So basically wrapping scraping into an API, and for that we actually looked a lot at the legal situation, and it's there was a very prominent case also in the US where LinkedIn sued a scraping company, and even LinkedIn, you could argue that it's behind a certain wall, not a paywall, but a login wall, and LinkedIn lost. And generally, the law is, if you put it out into the web and it's basically this way public information, someone else can use it. And if you don't want that, either don't put it out there or prohibit that the search engines access it. I mean, that's the simple same thing as you can prohibit that Google scrapes your site, and also others spiders scrape your site. But then what's the point of putting it online in the first place? So, I mean, that's the whole fundamental principle of the internet, and what makes information flow and also competition blossom. So scraping, long story short, is absolutely legal.
Fascinating. I think as well, I mean, we are not allowed to give any legal advice here, and we definitely always check, especially in the US and in every country, check with your lawyers for sure. No, but I think here as well, we get some indications where there could be really exciting business opportunities. So I think that's really great to see. So coming us back to Sedo, you were working on the project, building out the website there. How the content, especially through scraping, how did you then drive traffic to the site? What were like the main sources? Then to classical problem, now we have a product, we have something to sell, but how can we kind of stand out there with all the noise going out there in the internet, all these offerings and so?
Yeah. That we face the same problems every entrepreneur. We did, I think, the standard stuff everybody did, and everybody's still doing. We did some press work, tried to get into publications and blogs and so on and so forth. We did search engine optimization, trying to get sites to link us. We did some search engine advertising that was out there. Today, of course, you would also add social to the mix. We did a ton of things, and many of those things work. Ultimately, I think in our case, we found one thing, and that's always the hard thing. Is you need to try a lot of things, but then you need to scale what works and you need to stop what doesn't work. So for example, banner ads didn't work for us. We spent like 100 or 200K of our investment with banner ads, and it just didn't convert. And so we stopped it. And we ultimately found one method that was very peculiar to what our business model at Sedo. We said to domain owners, hey, you've got a good domain, and that domain is just blank. It has no content. So why don't you forward this domain to us? And then you put a sign there, the domain is for sale. And that was actually the innovation. We said, hey, we also put some ads which are targeted to your domain below that for sale sign. And it sounds pretty boilerplate today, but that was a real innovation, because that was actually before Google AdWords. I mean, it was essentially Google. It was Google AdWords. It was like you have a domain with a certain topic. That's like someone types it in. That's like typing in a keyword on Google, and you find targeted ads. So we could say we almost invented Google AdWords, and that was what kickstarted the company, because people were like, oh wow, I can earn money with my domain while it's just sitting there, and they were forwarding all that traffic to us, so our traffic just skyrocketed more than any of the other methods, and that was what scaled. And so at some point we were like focusing the entire company on how do we get people to forward to us, and everything else was just side stuff.
I can see that, no? All these inbound links, all the traffic, like Google as well, and sending you amazing traffic and so on, then really this flywheel kicking in. Looking at as well the decision, so it seems like you started it a bit as well as a student project. You were still studying, finishing up studies. How about your co-founders? How did you find them? And when you said who was like in the team, and which roles did they have?
So my co-founders were old friends of mine. We grew up in the same village close to Freiburg, played soccer together, started coding together, and so we knew each other. And there was one guy joining when we started the company, whom we hadn't known for that long, but who was kind of in a similar field. And so we were a team of 4 people. And we actually had very complementary skills. So one was really good in operations. One was a technologist, so that the CTO. One was a product brain. I was definitely more the guy who was responsible for marketing and selling and overall general strategy. So without kind of knowing, we did what I always advise people is get teams together who are really complementary skill sets. So not just in terms of what you studied, like don't try to start a company with 3 business people or 3 technologists. Try to mix it up. Try to really get complementary skills also in what people like to do. Some people like to always move forward and basically create new frontiers, but also create new problems. And other people are really good in structuring things and making sure that everybody really understands things. And those are the more kind of operational people. And then there are other people who are really good in kind of taking a vertical dive into problems which are technology related, and really get a grip on the hard tech problems. And those are usually the good CTOs. And I think, without knowing, we kind of were that type of team.
I often say when the founding team gets kind of above 3 people, there's a high likelihood of as well have founding team churn. Maybe in this case, since you knew each other, there was some experience there, but then oftentimes knowing each other privately is different from actually now working on real projects. And so any lessons learned there for people that think about who should I start the company with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it certainly helps if you know each other prior to starting a company together. You don't have to be friends for 10 years or something. I mean, that's rare, but generally it's helpful to know how the other person works, what his or her style is, and if you really kind of work together on an actual project. So that I would certainly advise. And the other thing I would certainly advise is, I think you mentioned it with churn, is that you should plan for eternity and for a marathon and not for a sprint when you start a company. But you should also take into account that it happens that people's lives change. It happens that founder teams fight and and split, and so you have to do a bit of planning for that with vesting schemes, for example, because the worst thing is if for example, you have 3 founders, you start a company, a year in, one of the 3 decides to do something else, but they all have the same shares. That would just feel really bad for the 2 other ones who work hard and sweat and come to work every day to grow this company. And so vesting is really something which people need to think when they start a company. And it's not for the investors, it's really for the founding team first and foremost.
And no, for people, they can know Google vesting, a bit about vesting scheme. What's common there in quick terms, it's that the founders have to actually own the equity over the years. And if they leave, for example, in the first year, all the equity would go back to the company, who then has that equity to find somebody new and incentivize them through equity. No,
right.
So very, very important concept. And yeah, the founders oftentimes make mistakes. They don't know about these things, and then they don't have it in place. Then it's kind of hard at times to solve the issue. Looking as well, and there's so much to cover, and we definitely have to do a follow-on as well. You had lots of experience as then co-starting companies. You're chairman of Adblock Plus, one of the biggest ad blockers in the world, or it's actually the biggest ad blocker, I believe. Other projects, you're very active business angel. You now buy as well companies, so the SaaS.group. Maybe if we switch from the entrepreneur side and getting started to the investor side and kind of seeing many projects and maybe common themes around that. When we're talking about as well early stage and early stage mistakes, what would you say are the 2-3 main mistakes that you see founders making?
Yeah, I mean the top 3 mistakes I would say is one is just picking the wrong team. Is you pick people, co-founders by, for example, likability, or you pick them by them being very similar to you, opposed to being complementary to you, or just simply bad. It's like, it's the same. I've made over time. I've made a lot of mistakes hiring people. I think it's one of the things you get better with more experience. So certainly. And obviously I've hired tons of wonderful people, but I've also made some really big mistakes there. And likewise, you can fail in just hiring or finding your wrong co-founder. And so the wrong team's just not the right skill set, not the right quality of talent for your particular endeavor. That is probably the number 1 mistake, which is why investors look first and foremost at the team. Do they have the qualifications? Do they work well together? Do they have the drive, the enthusiasm, but also the stamina to do that for many years? So that's certainly one mistake. The second mistake is really not in an early stage, not having product market fit. Is really having the wrong angle to a problem. And approaching it in a way that either doesn't resonate with the customers, or that you're not solving a problem which is on top of their priority list, or just solving an irrelevant problem. There are many, or solving a problem, but nobody's willing to pay. So, for example, I always see a lot of business plans and pitch decks around like student events and event calendars and stuff, because when students start, that's the time in your life when you do a lot of events and go out and stuff. But it's a business where it's extremely hard to earn money. And so pretty much all of them have failed, the ones I've seen. And it's just because you tackle a problem, but to get students into clubs is not something where you can make a lot of money. And so just one, and there are numerous examples out there. And maybe the third thing is really not just picking the wrong founders and the wrong team, but also a bad shareholder structure. I've seen that countless times. In your early starting phase, you make decisions on who are your co-investors, how many shares do they get, and there I see a ton of mistakes. I see people who give out equity to consultants and lawyers and stuff. I see sometimes business angels taking advantage of unexperienced founders and then basically taking half of the company for them for not much return and not much contribution. And so I think that third thing, bad shareholder structure, that's certainly a topic which is often overlooked, but which is equally important as the other two.
What's the best way to kind of learn about that? What's kind of standard in the market? So one thing is, with advisors, so be extremely careful. I normally say that as well. People shouldn't be advisors or consultants. They should actually put money in. Then you get the advice for free, for example. Other things where you say like what's coming, or how could people find out what's coming in this space?
Well, generally read as much as you can, listen to podcasts like this as much as you can. And yeah, I think, Jan, you named it, pick a good business angel, someone who has a proven track record with the right companies, and to put in money, not much money. It's really in the beginning, you need very little money, but also that way you can preserve most of your equity. But then, as you said it, you'll get the advice for free. And that is advice which is totally aligned with yours, because you both want the company to succeed. But it's people who have seen that before, who've done that, who can guide you at the right stages. And that's certainly good business angels who have been entrepreneurs before and who know and appreciate your endeavor.
Mm-hmm. And there as well, I definitely can endorse you as a very outstanding business angel. We have done various ones together, and very committed as well. You have certain people that actually then come to these monthly board calls and actually add value. And as well, to be frank, many business angels say early on they add a lot of value, but then they never show up to anything as well. So yeah, I think I advise people as well to definitely do background checks on things, right?
Definitely. Reference calls on business angels is definitely something I advise every founder. Is like when you hire people, you also call former employers for reference checks, and you should do the same with business angels. Very, very good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Maybe because you've seen so many ventures as well. Is there one kind of overall concept or understanding or mindset or so that you kind of take almost like a guiding light for yourself when looking at ventures, when starting ventures, like the core kind of Tim concept in terms of entrepreneurship?
Well, good question. I think every startup is a little unique, and maybe that is a concept in itself. I like the founders to drive their destiny. There are many cases where I disagree with the founders on certain things. Then there's this famous. I think I used it in one of our startups, Jan, just recently. Without naming any names here, but one of the many ones we're invested together. I used that in a context. The saying of Jan Bezos of Jeff Bezos. Jan Bezos.
Getting there.
That was a good.
We'll have Jeff on the show as well coming up.
Good Freudian slip, yeah. So the saying is disagree but commit, and I think that's actually a very important principle here. Is there are a lot of times when it can be with a founder as an investor, it can be with your employee if you're the CEO or founder of a company, you disagree with what he or she says, but then you still commit, because at the end of the day, the founders run the show, and you as an angel, you can guide them, and you can nudge them in certain directions. You can also sometimes more persistently nudge them, but you should never do more. Like sure, if they run completely into disaster, there are seldomly cases where you might want to use a veto right or something, but generally you shouldn't do that. Generally, you should always nudge them. And so like in this particular case, when we were discussing a startup there, we weren't particularly excited with what the founders proposed, but we felt like, okay, they should try their luck. And we disagree, and we tell them that, but we say we commit, and you decide that. And now that we've committed, we are on board, and we'll help you as much as we can, even if we don't think that was the right decision. Because once the decision is made, the worst thing is then if the founders go into that direction and the investors into that can also kill the company. And so maybe that is, if you ask me for principle, it's the founders run the show. They need to be passionate about what they do. They need that's their own destiny, and you can help them, you can coach them, but you shouldn't overstep those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I think is really, I can see as well applying to so many areas. But in the end, as well, the founder needs to have this steering wheel, no backseat driving from kind of investors or people, consultants. I think, oh, they have so much more experience, especially younger entrepreneurs often feel, hey, these guys seem to have way more experience, so maybe I just should listen. But here kind of as well, definitely a word of caution. In the end, take this as advice, input, but you at the, on the driving seat, you're driving. And always have that, and as well from the investors community, shout out as well. Hey, please, no backseat driving. Give advice, but make sure and be certain who's actually then running the show in the end. Who works in the venture 24/7, basically.
Right.
Fantastic. Maybe then looking forward, what are the topics in entrepreneurship that excite you the most? You've started many ventures, invested in many ventures. Right now, what's for you personally the most exciting thing in entrepreneurship?
So I'm super excited at the moment about climate tech. I come from a software background, but my passion, and maybe that's the Freiburg upbringing, which is dubbed one of the most ecological cities in Germany. I think was also the first one ever who had a green mayor. That's been a kind of a passion topic of mine all my life, and so I've invested in companies like Ecosia long before climate tech was cool. So it was like 7 years ago, but very recently it has picked up a lot of steam, and I actually think the best and brightest minds of our generation, or even more the generation of the students who are shaping the next generations of entrepreneurs, they should work on the really important problems, and climate is the real important problem. It's not making people click on ads, or it's not improving SaaS conversion rate, or some silly games, but it's really climate tech. So and you can do a lot, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in software, in other fields, and I see a lot of really bright founders there who are really passionate about the topic, and I've actually doubled down on that segment. I mean, I still do a lot of software stuff, but I've doubled down on climate investment. I'm working together with Ecosia. I'm working on a big fund now also with regards to climate investment. So it's really something where besides my software practice, I want to spend more time, and I'm also quite excited to do more. And I hope that there are more founders actually tackling that topic.
Mm-hmm. Super exciting topic as well. For people now, and I can see many here of the watchers and listeners wanting to go into this space, what would you say is then typically the first step to get started? So that we have something actionable for them to do now. What should they do if they say, hey, okay, there's obviously really big problems. No, and I can see myself, I really want to work towards addressing them, solving them, as well, maybe building a for-profit company that becomes sustainable. In the case of Ecosia, you actually transferred it then and made it then a non-for-profit. So all of this stuff I call venturing overall. You venture out. What would be for maybe younger founders that don't come from the industry of green tech or so, could be a good first step to get started?
Well, what a good starting point would be, you go to Ecosia and you type in project drawdown.
We'll link as well and later to that.
Yeah, the link. So basically you go to project drawdown, which is kind of in my opinion, the best general framework when it comes to climate change and ways to mitigate it. So project drawdown is essentially a scientific extensive list of all the things which need to be done. And it's essentially all stuff we know, from electric vehicles to photovoltaics to eating less meat and things like that, but also some less known things like improving the soil. Is for example one of the things which are one of the biggest levers in carbon sequestration, but it provides kind of a really good framework of what the world needs to do in 80 different categories, and just thinking, okay, is there any of that which interests me? That I think is a good starting point, and then read as much as possible and see if you find like-minded people who are maybe in this field, and maybe as a really specific starting point. I mean, you also, as in your in your function as a professor, but also I think the podcast will address a lot of people from the business side. And what I see, especially in climate tech, is that there are a lot of really brilliant engineers, agriculturists, forest specialists, but people who are deeply rooted in science in the physical world. So not in the software world, which we know, but in the physical world with physical products where problems are definitely harder. You can't just code something, and if the code doesn't work, you throw it away. And so, and try to find, if you're in that field, try to find out to team up with someone like there. And that's what I always wish, because I see so many teams there then maybe specialists in soil reproduction, and you find they lack the business person. And likewise, the business people then tend to solve the easy problems because they don't even think that there's a world out there with the engineers. So really bringing engineers and business together. So if you're a business person you're watching, then try to find who are really good scientists in your field, in your university, in that read up who has written the best blogs and who are really the experts. Because the experts on the other side, they often face the problem that they are experts, but they don't know how to start a company. And they maybe also hate selling. They hate going out and pitching and telling the same story over and over again, which is selling, whether you sell or fundraise. You actually, you just repeat yourself all the time. And so try to team up and tackle the really important problems. And yeah, Project Drawdown, in my opinion, is a really good starting point for kind of a trickle down. This is what needs to be done, and this is all the different ways you can work on this.
Perfect. Then we have the game plan to get started, to make it real. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us, sharing all these insights, and all the best going forward. Lots of exciting ventures ahead. And for everybody out there, now is the time you have to make it real, and you know where to start. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone out there.